On our 10th wedding anniversary, my wife was fooling around with her first love in my house. My mom walked in on them and had a heart attack from the shock. She was rushed to the hospital and almost didn't make it. But my wife, Lillian, was completely unfazed. Caleb and I were just sitting a little close. "Can you stop being such a drama queen?" I was completely disillusioned with her and pulled out the divorce papers I'd already prepared. But after the divorce, she was filled with regret. Not only did she cut things off with her first love, but she also knelt at my mom's grave, begging for my forgiveness. Chapter 1. When I received the urgent call from the hospital about my mom's critical condition, I was picking out a 10th anniversary gift for my wife, Lillian. The doctor's voice was frantic. "Why is there no one with the patient?" "She's had a sudden, severe heart attack. You need to get here immediately to sign the consent forms for surgery." Hearing this, I suppressed the panic rising in my chest and sent a message to Lillian. She had the day off today. Wasn't she supposed to be with Mom? But the situation was urgent, so I didn't dwell on it. I floored it and sped to the hospital. Seeing my mother lying on the hospital bed, her face pale and haggard, barely breathing, was agonizing. But even after I'd signed the papers, Lillian hadn't replied. I called her, but a strange man's voice answered. "Lily's busy taking a shower right now. If you have a message, you can tell me first." I froze. Who is this? Where is Lillian right now? The man on the other end of the line chuckled, his tone becoming openly provocative. "You must be sincere, right? I'm Caleb Vance, Lillian's first love. We're at a hotel, of course. She wore herself out earlier, so she needs a good rest." He paused. Then, as if to make me believe him, he started a video call. The hotel bed was a mess, with clothes scattered everywhere. Lillian's clothes were strewn carelessly on the floor. Seeing it, my heart sank like a stone. I knew that in Lillian's heart, Caleb was the one that got away, an idealized love no one could compare to. He was brilliant and handsome, and had been with her throughout her youth. I had even seen with my own eyes the shy, undisguised love in her expression when she was with him. But Caleb had gone abroad for his studies during his sophomore year of college, and they had broken up. After being abandoned, Lillian had spiraled, even developing depression. I was the one who stayed by her side and helped her through it. But now Caleb had returned at some point, and they had gone to a hotel room behind my back. I was about to demand an explanation when in the next second Lillian appeared, wrapped in a bath towel. Facing the camera, she was completely unfazed. "I was just tired after a meeting and came here to lie down for a bit. Sincere, you'd better not make a scene." Even caught red-handed, Lillian was as calm as ever. She even had the gall to turn it around on me, telling me not to be dramatic. Looking at her impatient expression, a bitter sting filled my eyes. "Mom had a sudden heart attack and is in the hospital. Why didn't you answer my messages? And what's that red mark on your neck? Lillian, do you even remember that today is our wedding anniversary?" At my words, a flicker of guilt crossed her eyes. After all, just that morning, we had explicitly agreed to celebrate our anniversary together. But then she spoke again, her tone dismissive. "What are you talking about? It's just a mosquito bite. Why are you so jealous over nothing? Besides, that's your mother, not mine. What good would messaging me do?" With that, she hung up the phone. The screen froze on Caleb's provocative smile. When I tried to call back, she had already blocked me. Listening to the busy signal, my heart turned to ice. A short while later, the doctor emerged from the operating room. "The patient is awake and stable for now." "Okay, thank you, doctor." I quickly composed myself and rushed into the ward. Chapter 2. Mom was lying on the bed, her complexion still ashen. When she saw me, she managed a weak smile. "Son, I made you worry." Seeing her like this, my nose tingled. "Don't say that. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters." Mom nodded and started to say something else, but I stopped her. "You just woke up. Whatever it is, it can wait until you've recovered." For some reason, a terrible premonition washed over me. I had a feeling that Mom's collapse had something to do with Lillian. At my insistence, she didn't say any more, quietly closing her eyes to rest. The doctor then called me out and instructed me that Mom should only have liquid foods for now. The hospital cafeteria is pretty crowded right now. You could drive around and find something nearby. I gave him a grateful smile, told Mom I'd be back, and drove off to buy her some soup. But, as fate would have it, I ran right into Lillian and Caleb, who were having a meal. When she saw me, her brow furrowed. "Sincere, are you following me? I already told you, Caleb and I are just friends. Can you stop looking for trouble?" I thought my heart was already dead and buried. But hearing her words, it began to ache uncontrollably again. It felt as if a hand was squeezing my throat, and the feeling of suffocation made my head spin. I forced down my emotions and explained, "Mom is in the hospital nearby. I was just coming to get her some food. I wasn't following you." Beside her, Caleb smiled. "What a coincidence. Why don't we go visit Auntie Harrison together in a bit?" Lillian hesitated, but after a glance at Caleb, she agreed. I wanted to refuse, but Caleb was already ushering me along. In the car, she and Caleb sat in the back. They started flirting and joking, completely ignoring my presence. They reminisced about their past, and I couldn't get a word in. "You used to be so clingy, always forcing me to say I loved you before you'd leave me alone," Caleb said deliberately, shooting a provocative glance at me in the rearview mirror. Lillian gave a dry laugh, but didn't deny it. The atmosphere grew increasingly awkward. When we arrived at the hospital, my mother's calm expression instantly turned to one of agitation the moment she saw them. Mom pointed a trembling finger at Lillian, her words broken and gasping. "You bitch, you cheated on him. And you still have the nerve to come here hearing that I stood frozen to the spot." No wonder. My mom had been in perfectly good health. Now she was like this. And Lillian, who was supposed to be resting at home on her day off, had been at a hotel. That bad feeling intensified. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and demanded of her, "What were you and Caleb doing at our house? Are you the reason Mom is like this?" Lillian rolled her eyes. "Caleb and I were just sitting a little close, that's all. How was I supposed to know your mom would end up like this? And what's with this interrogation? Don't you trust me? If that's the case, let's just get a divorce." Hearing that, I nodded decisively. "Fine. Let's do it." Before, she always used divorce as a threat. I cherished her, so every time I had no choice but to surrender. But now I had completely lost the will to coax her anymore. Since she and Caleb were so blatant, I might as well grant them their wish. The atmosphere turned ice cold. Caleb stepped in to mock me. "All right, it's just a small thing. If you make such a scene, you'll just be a laughingstock. Lily has been with you for so many years. She's truly devoted to you." I finally snapped. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Lillian, take him and get the hell out. Don't be an eyesore in front of my mother." I had always spoken to Lillian gently. I had never yelled at her like this. She stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. Caleb also stood there, stunned, as if terrified by my reaction. "Sincere, I'm warning you. Stop this act. If you keep it up, I'll really be done with you." Lillian's voice was full of impatience, as if she'd reached her limit. "Are you deaf? Didn't you want a divorce? If we're getting a divorce, then let's talk about that. Cut the damn bullshit." It was the first time I had ever spoken to her so harshly. A flicker of shock crossed Lillian's eyes and her chest heaved, but her face remained strangely calm. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but I'll let it slide this time. As for the divorce, I'll just pretend I never heard it. You and your mom get some rest. I'm leaving." After she left, I immediately opened the feed from the security cameras at home. I'd installed pinhole cameras in various corners for security. I never thought they would come in handy like this. The moment I turned it on, the sounds of a man and a woman in the throes of passion filled the air. Chapter 3. I stared at the footage, my face ashen. After I left that morning, Lillian had immediately called Caleb over. They shamelessly had sex in our bedroom, then moved to the living room. My mother, knowing it was our anniversary, had come over specifically to cook a celebratory meal for us. But she had walked in on their affair. In that instant, the shock sent her into cardiac arrest, and she collapsed to the floor. But Lillian and Caleb had calmly and unhurriedly gotten dressed before casually walking out to see her. They even ignored my mother's pleas for help, standing over her body to discuss how they would handle me. With this happening, that old hag can't stick around. Yeah, if anyone's to blame, it's her for having such bad luck. They deliberately delayed, only calling 911 after a while before leaving directly for the hotel. If the doctor hadn't called me, my mother would have been left to die. Mom, don't you worry. I will make them pay. After turning off the recording, I sat by my mother's side, gripping her hand tightly. I was terrified of her suffering any more shocks. But Mom could no longer speak. She could only look at me, tears streaming down her face. I stayed by her side until she fell asleep, then stepped out to call my lawyer. I told him to draft a divorce agreement for me immediately. For 10 years, I had given Lillian everything she ever wanted. The result was that in her eyes, I was nothing more than a doormat, a simp with no dignity. Recalling her attitude today, the last shred of hope I'd been clinging to finally vanished. But just then, Caleb's voice came from behind me. He handed me a piece of paper, looking at me with a taunting expression. I couldn't say this in front of Lily. The truth is, she's pregnant with my child. If you have any sense, you'll back off gracefully. Don't keep pestering her. It's annoying. I was completely stunned. This paper. It was Lillian's pregnancy report. I couldn't believe it. She was pregnant with Caleb's child. In the past, Lillian had always said she was still young and adamantly refused to have children, and I could only respect her wishes. For 10 years, I watched as my colleagues all showed off their kids on social media. All I could do was watch with envy. Now it seemed she just didn't want to have a child with me. Caleb had barely been back, and she had thrown herself at him, eager to be intimate. A wave of nausea washed over me, as if I'd swallowed a fly. I wanted nothing more than to punch Caleb in the face. Caleb leaned casually against the window, mocking me. So what if you were married for 10 years? The moment I came back, didn't she still choose me without hesitation? He was utterly confident, his tone dripping with disdain. But I knew it was Lillian who gave him that confidence. My hands clenched into fists, and a storm of negative emotions threatened to drown me. But the sharp pain in my palms brought me back to my senses. Making a scene here would only humiliate me further. I took the pregnancy report and put it away. I was already planning to leave her. Thanks for bringing me the evidence. I'll file for divorce and make sure she leaves with nothing. Caleb's face darkened. You dare, what kind of man are you, to use this to threaten her? Lillian must have painted me as a complete pushover to him. He clearly never expected me to react this way. You two did the deed. What are you afraid of now? Ignoring him, I turned to go back to the hospital room. Chapter 4. The next second, Caleb grabbed my collar. He patted my cheek, his tone laced with impatience. Can't we just part amicably? Leave each other with some dignity. Don't make Lily hate you completely. Besides, this alone isn't enough to make her leave with nothing. In the end, you'll be the one who's embarrassed. He didn't know that Lillian and I had signed a prenuptial agreement before our wedding. At the time, Lillian had even made me swear I would never betray her. Now, ironically, it was being used against her. Don't touch me. What I do is none of your business. I shoved Caleb away, my voice a low warning. Seeing this, Caleb didn't follow. He shot me a venomous look, spat out a "just you wait," and left. When I returned, I was relieved to see my mom was still asleep. She must never find out about this. The consequences would be unimaginable. Just then, my lawyer sent over the drafted divorce agreement. I immediately forwarded it to Lillian. Sign this, and we'll set a date to finalize the divorce. She quickly replied with a question mark. Sincere, are you serious? Can you please not make a scene like this? Just because Mom is sick, doesn't that mean I'm not upset too? I will absolutely not get a divorce. You can forget it. Reading her messages, I just felt utterly disgusted. You're already pregnant with Caleb's child. Why are you still clinging to me? This divorce is happening, period. After that, I set her notifications to silent. I wouldn't be her fool any longer. If necessary, I would sue her directly. By the afternoon, my mother's condition had more or less stabilized. I went out to gather more evidence to strengthen my case for the divorce. But I never imagined that Caleb would show up at the hospital to cause trouble again. When I got the call from the caregiver, my mind went blank. Sincere, you have to get back to the hospital. Quick, some guy just came and told your mom that your wife is pregnant and the baby isn't yours. Your mom was so upset she fainted on the spot. They're trying to revive her now. Hearing this, I drove like a madman back to the hospital. But what I saw was my mother's cold, lifeless body. Mom, I knelt in the morgue and squeezed my eyes shut in despair. The doctor had said she would be fine, that she could go home after a few more days of rest. How could this happen? I was only gone for a short while now. I no longer had a mother. A thick, dark hatred rose within me. I wanted nothing more than to take a knife and kill Caleb and Lillian right now. My mom had promised me she would always be with me. I had even lied to her, telling her she'd get to hold her long-awaited grandchild this year. She had suffered her whole life and hadn't gotten to enjoy much of the good life with me. And in the end, she had to endure this. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a tight fist. The pain was so raw. It wasn't until a nurse noticed my state and gave me a nitroglycerin pill that I slowly began to calm down. Don't destroy yourself over this. Your mom wouldn't want to see you truly hurt yourself. Because Caleb hadn't kept quiet, the story had already spread through the hospital. The nurses looked at me with deep sympathy. Once I had composed myself, I immediately took out my phone and contacted a private investigator. I told him to dig up everything he could on Caleb. I needed to know all his weaknesses so I could strike him down in one blow. He killed my mother. I would make sure he never knew a moment of peace for the rest of his life. In the days I spent arranging my mother's funeral, Lillian didn't call once. Instead, she was off traveling and having fun with Caleb. Not only that, but Caleb posted on his social media, a gift of shares from the one I love most. It feels so good to be trusted. I clicked on it and saw that Lillian had given him 5% of her company's shares. I let out a small, cold laugh and liked the post. I was the largest shareholder in Lillian's company. In the beginning, I had worked tirelessly, negotiating contracts and securing investments to support her. Now that the company was just starting to take off, she wanted Caleb to reap the benefits. It was clear just how much she had invested in him. After finishing my mother's funeral arrangements, I called my lawyer again. I decided to withdraw all of my investments from Lillian's company. If I was going to make a clean break, I would sever every last tie with my own hands. I didn't care how she wanted to dote on Caleb. What mattered was that my assets would not suffer any losses. Chapter 5. When I went to the company with my lawyer, I happened to walk in on Lillian and Caleb getting intimate in the break room. Her belly was slightly swollen. She was clearly 2 or 3 months along. I glanced at Caleb, and it took everything I had not to punch him. If he hadn't gone to my mother and spouted his nonsense, she would still be alive. When Lillian found out I was there to pull my investments, she lost all composure and started screaming. Sincere, what is the meaning of this? Our company is about to go public. Your sudden withdrawal will have a huge impact on us. I looked at her indifferently. We've already said we're separating. We can't have our finances still entangled after we've made a clean break, can we? Lillian froze for a moment. Then she looked up at me in disbelief. Sincere, how dare you talk to me like that? In my eyes, she had once been a goddess, but now I was done indulging her. I turned away and took the transfer agreement from my lawyer's hands, telling Lillian to sign. But Lillian's mood strangely calmed. She looked at me and suddenly said, I get it. You're acting like this because you want my attention, don't you? It's only been a few days and you've already learned to play games. Her words were so absurd that even my lawyer couldn't help but roll his eyes. I waved a dismissive hand. I'm at this point and you still think I'm playing games with you? Try using your brain for once. Hurry up and sign. We can get the divorce finalized while we're at it. It'll save me the trouble later. Seeing my resolute attitude, Lillian's eyes suddenly turned red. Fine, I'll sign, just don't you regret it, but I will never agree to a divorce. You can give up on that idea. She knew about our prenup and that she would be the one to lose out. That's why she was acting this way. After the transfer agreement was settled, I was about to leave. But Caleb's mocking voice rang out from behind me. Some people are just cheapskates, right down to their bones. If I were him, I would have just gifted you these shares. Why go through all this trouble of withdrawing investments? Isn't it disgusting?" Hearing that, I could no longer control my anger. I threw a punch straight at him. Caleb was caught off guard, and my fist instantly gave him a bloody nose. Lillian rushed to help him up, shooting me a venomous glare. "Sincere, you've gone too far," I looked at them with contempt. "A gigolo who sleeps his way to the top has no right to talk to me like that." I had already dug up all of Caleb's secrets. His family had gone bankrupt overseas, and he had only come back to find a sucker to bail him out. And Lillian was foolishly still under the impression that Caleb was the same rich kid he used to be. At this, Lillian was furious. She stepped in front of me, raising her hand to slap me. But I caught her wrist. I narrowed my eyes and looked at her coldly. "I won't hit you, seeing as you're a pregnant woman. But if there's a next time, don't blame me for not being so courteous." Lillian winced in pain and had to let go. "Sincere, how could you become like this?" I let out a sneer. "Before you were my wife, so I let you have your way. Now that we're getting divorced, who the hell do you think you are?" With that, I left with my lawyer. I didn't look back, no matter how much Caleb and Lillian tried to provoke me from behind. Chapter 6. After returning, I immediately filed a lawsuit against Lillian. She wouldn't agree to a divorce, but I wasn't going to waste my time with her. Every extra day felt like another dose of poison. During this period, she called me countless times, and I blocked every number. On the day of the hearing, I came prepared with ample evidence. The outcome was as I had hoped. The court ruled that Lillian would leave the marriage with nothing. Now, apart from a shell of a company, she had nothing. Walking out of the courthouse, Lillian clutched her belly and looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Sincere, after all these years, it's not like I had no feelings for you. If Caleb hadn't shown up, I would have been willing to spend the rest of my life with you." I waved my hand dismissively. "Spending a lifetime with you? That doesn't sound like a good thing." Lillian pouted and got into Caleb's car. After the beating I gave him, he had learned his lesson and remained silent. He only gave Lillian a complicated look as she lamented her fate. Back home, I stared at my mother's photograph. Letting them off so easily was impossible. So I set a trap. I had someone pass a message to Lillian, saying an investor was interested in her company. The condition was that she had to put up her company as collateral. Lillian quickly took the bait, begging the middleman for a chance to meet me. A few days later, Lillian booked a private room at a fancy hotel. When I arrived, Lillian was stunned. "How could it be you?" She quickly recovered, her expression turning ugly. "Are you doing this just to laugh at me?" I slowly sipped my wine. "I'm here to let you see the real Caleb." With that, I tossed a file onto the table in front of her. Beside her, Caleb panicked and tried to snatch the documents, but it was too late. Lillian's lips began to tremble uncontrollably. She looked at Caleb in disbelief. "You're already married in England?" Suddenly I found the whole thing tedious. That file contained all sorts of information, proof that Caleb had sold off shares and leaked false company secrets, but the only thing Lillian focused on was that he was married. It seemed she was truly serious about him, but I wasn't there to witness their true love, so I added more fuel to the fire. I played a recording of what Caleb had said the last time he was drunk. "I never liked Lillian. An old, plain-looking hag like her isn't even fit to shine my shoes. I was just playing along with her because she liked me and was willing to spend money on me." Lillian stood up and slapped Caleb across the face. "Were those your real feelings?" Her hands were shaking, her eyes filled with disappointment. "I gave up so much for you, even my family. Why would you betray me?" At this point, Caleb dropped the act. He sneered and gave Lillian a hard shove. "I've been sick of your old lady smell for a long time. If you weren't still of some use to me, what makes you think a guy with my options would stick around with you?" With that, Caleb rushed out of the private room. He left a bewildered Lillian on the floor, crying her heart out. I watched their little drama unfold in silence, feeling nothing but a grim satisfaction. After a decade of partnership and shared life, she had refused to believe in my character, choosing to trust Caleb instead. Now that she'd been duped, She had no one to blame but herself. Did you ever think this day would come when you two let my mom die? It seems your love wasn't so strong after all. After taunting her for a bit, I prepared to leave. But in the next second, Lillian's face contorted in terror. It hurts. My stomach hurt so much I turned to see a large pool of blood spreading beneath her. Chapter 7. I gave her a cold glance, then sat back down. Lillian crawled towards me, begging me to call 911. I shook my head, my voice dripping with vengeance. Lillian, when my mom was having a heart attack and begging you for help, she was in this much pain too. So, you can just bear with it for a while. A flash of hatred crossed Lillian's eyes, but I had taken her phone, and she was helpless. Eventually, after a large amount of blood had pooled on the floor, Lillian fainted. Of course, I wasn't going to let her actually die. After confirming she was still breathing, I calmly called for an ambulance. Because of the delay, her baby couldn't be saved. In the end, she even had to have her uterus removed. Only after hearing this news did I leave the hospital with a sense of closure. Lillian had paid the price for her actions. Next, it was Caleb's turn. I called all of his creditors and gave them his address. I also exposed his fraudulent activities online. Before this, Caleb had been running a social media account, building a following by flaunting his wealth. Little did his fans know, most of what he showed off in his videos was bought with high-interest loans. This time, he was in for a world of hurt, and Lillian's company, plagued by scandal, went completely bankrupt. Lillian became a destitute pauper. The next time I saw her, she was a shadow of her former polished self. She looked gray and disheveled, her hair looking like it hadn't been washed in 3 days. She knelt beside me, begging me to help her. Sincere, I personally sent Caleb to prison. I know you hate him. I've atoned for my sins. I looked at her coldly, my heart completely still. Why are you telling me this? I already know. I had been following Caleb's case closely. I knew every detail. Before he went to prison, I had people beat him up and slash his face with a knife. From now on, even if he gets out, he won't be able to rely on his looks to get by. Lillian lowered her head and said timidly, I want to ask you for a chance. Can we start over? I looked at Lillian, feeling not a flicker of emotion. When we were the only two left in the room, I suddenly felt an overwhelming aura of sorrow clinging to her. Lillian looked at me, defeated. Then I let out a self-deprecating laugh. She said she loved me? She actually loved me? Then, what was all the humiliation and coldness I had endured? Her plea for reconciliation was nothing but a joke to me now. I stood up, walked to the window with my back to her, and said in an icy voice, You killed my mother, you destroyed everything I had, and now you want me to take you back? Hearing my words, Lillian's face turned deathly pale. She said in a trembling voice, Sincere, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I've already atoned. I turned around, my gaze as sharp as a knife. Do you know how much pain my mother was in? Do you know how much she hoped you would come to your senses? Lillian's eyes turned red. She lowered her head, tears dripping continuously onto the floor. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rage in my heart. Leave. I don't want to see you again. At my words, Lillian looked up, her eyes filled with despair. Sincere, I won't leave, please. Give me a chance. Can we start over? I'm willing to go to Mom's grave and beg for her forgiveness. Beg her to give me a chance. The next day, Lillian actually went to my mother's grave. She stood before the tombstone, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear and remorse. She then said in a trembling voice, Mrs. Harrison, I really know I was wrong. Please give me a chance. Let Sincere and me start over, please. Her voice echoed in the empty cemetery, sounding exceptionally desolate. Tears streamed down her face, soaking the front of her shirt. I stood at a distance, watching her silently, my heart completely unmoved. I knew she had paid the price for her actions, but I still couldn't forgive her. Lillian's voice grew softer and softer, until it was nearly inaudible. Her body grew weaker and weaker, until she finally collapsed to the ground. Chapter 8. I ignored her and told my driver to leave. A short while later, it started to rain. Lillian woke up and called me. She was soaking wet, her face pale and sick. Meanwhile, I was sitting at home, eating a hot meal. Do you see now? I really have no feelings for you. Even if you died, I wouldn't shed a single tear. After saying that, I hung up before Lillian could reply. I immediately contacted a real estate agent to sell the house and move. From now on, I wanted nothing more to do with Lillian. I quickly found a new house, moved out, and started a new life. This new home was far from the shadows of the past, filled with sunlight and hope. Every morning, I would drink a cup of coffee on the balcony, enjoying the fresh air and warm sun. This new life felt more relaxed and free than ever before. Although I still thought of my mother sometimes, most of the time, I felt at peace. Lillian, undeterred, tried to contact me, but I blocked every attempt. She started sending frequent text messages, calling, and even waiting outside my house, but I never responded. One day she finally cornered me at the door of my new home, her eyes filled with pleading and despair. "Sincere, please, give me a chance. Can we start over?" Her voice trembled, her eyes glistening with tears. I looked at her coldly, my heart completely still. "Lillian, it's over between us. Go away. I don't want to see you again." "Sincere, I'm sorry. I just beg you, please don't hate me." I looked into her deep, sorrowful eyes. There was a time I wanted to lose myself in those eyes for a lifetime. But now, her tears had become an ocean, creating an uncrossable chasm between us. We were destined to remain on opposite shores. "I don't hate you. I just want to leave you and forget you." She wanted to say more, but I had already turned and closed the door. Listening to her heart-wrenching cries from outside, my heart didn't waver in the slightest. I knew I had truly let go of the past. Not long after, I met someone new, 100 times more beautiful than Lillian. Her name was Victoria Grant, and she was a gentle and kind woman. We met at a friend's party. When she smiled, her eyes would curve into crescents, radiating an incredible warmth. Chapter 9. I later found out that Victoria and I had gone to the same university. She had known who I was back then and even had a secret crush on me. I was just a nobody back then, of course you wouldn't have noticed me. But now, I've finally reached a place where I can stand by your side. I looked up and met her earnest, clear eyes. As we looked at each other, I felt my heart begin to race. It was a feeling I had never experienced, not even in the countless times Lillian had professed her love for me. Victoria asked me out a few times, and our impression of each other grew better and better. I also got to know her more. After graduating, she started her own business and was now quite successful. At the same time, she was deeply committed to charity work. She had sponsored no fewer than 10 students through their education. She had also adopted several scruffy-looking dogs, all of them strays she had found on the street. When I saw the before pictures of those now chubby dogs, I was stunned. She had taken these skeletal little creatures and filled them with flesh and blood through love. Unconsciously, I found myself falling for her completely. Victoria's warmth was exactly what I, prickly and wounded from so much hurt, was lacking. Slowly, I began to be the one to ask her out. We would go shopping together, or do nothing at all, just chatting idly, and it was always easy and pleasant. Lillian ran into me with Victoria a few times when she came to plead for another chance. She would hysterically demand an explanation, and I would send her away. "When did your taste get so bad? How is she better than me? Who I'm with is my business. It's not for you to comment on." Lillian completely broke down. "But I still love you. What do you want me to do?" "But the truth is, I don't love you anymore. To me, you're like a toy that fell into a cesspool, filthy and stinking. Maybe you were precious once, but now I don't even want to touch you to throw you in the trash, because I find you disgusting. Do you understand?" I was furious at that moment, my only thought to defend Victoria. When I turned and met Victoria's smiling eyes, I belatedly realized my own feelings. Lillian left, dejected, her steps unsteady. But I still felt nothing. Meanwhile, Victoria and I grew even closer. Our interactions became more and more intimate, and our mutual friends all knew about our relationship. They would often tease us. "Vicky is a good girl. You'd better not break her heart." I would just look at her, surrounded by the crowd, and think how lovely she was. Later, on my birthday, Victoria confessed her feelings to me. She had carefully prepared a gift for me, which even included a photo of me from our university days. A teenage crush that had lasted a decade, proven with the most earnest and simple gesture. My nose tingled, and I quietly put the photo away. "Sincere, you look especially handsome today," Victoria said with a smile, her eyes full of affection. I smiled back and took her hand. "That's because you're by my side." At my words, Victoria blushed and lowered her head, murmuring, "Sincere, I really, really like you." "Me too, Vicky." I looked at her affectionately, my heart filled with happiness and contentment. Amid the cheers of our friends, I watched her, shy with her head down, and a sweet feeling filled my heart. After that, we went to the movies together, traveled together, and shared all the little moments of our lives. Every day was filled with laughter and sweet memories. She also learned about what happened with my mother and would always offer to come with me to visit her grave. She even hired someone to regularly tend to my mother's resting place. "It wasn't your fault. Mom would definitely want you to be happy." Whenever my grief resurfaced, Vicky would patiently comfort me. She would even take me to my mother's grave and encourage me to talk. For some reason, I had a feeling that my mother would have been very pleased with Victoria, but regardless, I knew I had found true happiness. And all of this was something Lillian could never have given me. Another 6 months passed, and Victoria and I officially got married. We invited all our friends and family. On the wedding day, I thought I saw Lillian's figure flash in the distance. But the sunlight was too bright, and I couldn't see clearly. In the end, it didn't matter if it was her or not, because I had already met the person I would truly spend the rest of my life with. For the rest of my days, my life would be brilliant and happy, and she would no longer be a part of it.